Redditors who go into people's houses for their job. What is the strangest or creepiest thing you've ever seen or experienced? I'm a firefighter or EMT, so it's pretty normal to find a dead body, but one will always stay with me. There was this middle-aged guy who lived in his van out in a parking lot somewhat out of town. He never bothered anybody, so the police just let him stay there. It was around middle of July in Arizona, so about 105 to 110 degree heat, and we got a call to go check on him. Nobody had seen him for a while, and somebody had complained of a foul odor coming from his van. We all knew what we were gonna find, but nothing could prepare us for what we actually came across. I opened the back door to his van, and a cloud of flies flew out so thick you couldn't see through it. I was immediately punched in the face by the stench of death. And when the flies cleared out, we finally got a look at what was in there. The guy had been dead for at least 2 weeks, and his cats had survived by eating the fleshier parts of his body. I've seen my fair share of dead bodies, but something about a guy who had been in a van for 2 weeks in Arizona summer heat with cats eating his body, that just sticks with you. I used to install Dish Network for a living. I was installing for an elderly lady who complained that her sister's TV always showed the same thing hers did. I had a 2 TV installation order, so I figured that would be okay. I finished the installation and was demonstrating the system when she looked at the full-length mirror and complained that her sister's TV was still showing the same thing. Noped out of there as quick as I could and left notes on the account in case she called in. When I was in college, I was a pizza delivery driver for a small local pizzeria in a very upscale area. I saw some weird, cool stuff, but this one stands out. This takes place over a couple of weeks. While not out on a delivery, the drivers answer the phones to take orders. I took an order from an obviously drunk man. Fast forward a few days and take another order from the same guy. Again, he is very drunk. Few days later, I come into work and there is a message posted by the phones to not take orders from the address of the drunk guy. He had written bad checks to pay for the pizzas he had ordered. He calls again, drunk. I tell him we cannot take his order because of the bad checks. He begs me. It sounds like he's crying. I say it's okay if he pays cash. He says he will. Another driver gets sent with a pizza and instructions to only accept cash. About 20 minutes later, the driver calls to say that the guy doesn't have any cash. The guy wants the driver to bring him to an ATM. I tell the driver just to come back. When the driver gets back, he's almost in tears. The guy is pathetic. He's wasted drunk and there are bottles scattered all over his beautiful place. I put the pizza on top of the oven since after the shift we get to eat the mistakes. The guy calls back. He's crying, begging for food. I tell him there's nothing I can do. He says he hasn't eaten in however long. Again, I buckle and tell him I'll give him the pizza after the shift if nobody wants to eat it. A few hours later, the pizza is still on the oven, so I drive it over to the guy's house. I knock on the door. I can hear something going on inside but no answer. As I turn to leave, the door opens and the guy invites me in. I try to decline. I just want to give him the food and leave, but he insists he wants to pay me. We walk into the kitchen and there must be 100 empty vodka bottles. He pours himself another vodka and he gets his checkbook. He offers me a drink and I decline. He apologizes for the way he answered the door. He said hookers have been coming over and stealing from him. In the middle of writing the check, we are making small talk. I don't recall exactly how, but I try to tell him he needs to get some help. Rehab. Suddenly, there's a knock on the door and he gets really scared and shushes me. He said it's probably a hooker coming back to steal more. The door opens and a woman walks in. I'm really freaked now, thinking it's a murderous hooker. She's obviously freaked by my presence. It's his wife. She tells me she's his wife and wants to know who I am. I tell her I'm just delivering pizza. Once we get everything sorted out, she's a bit dubious, but pleasant. She tells me the guy's sad story. He fell off the wagon, so she left him, and she knows all about the hookers, etc., and has frozen his money. She writes me a personal check for the pizza with a generous tip, which I cashed, and after giving the pizza place its cut, split the tip with the other driver, about $10 each. Fast forward a few days, I'm back at work and the boss hands me a letter. It is from the woman thanking me to my boss. My kindness convinced her husband to go back into rehab. My boss asked what was I thinking. It was none of my business to get involved. Got fired. I'm a community mental health nurse. Visited an elderly lady in London one evening. She lived in an attic or loft apartment. It was winter and starting to get dark outside. I spent about a half hour with her talking. She was a bit manic, so was just talking at me for ages, really. After a while, I asked her if she was going to cook some dinner for herself. She said that her friend was going to do it. I asked when her friend was coming over. She said that he's already here and looks over my shoulder. I turn around and there's a black man standing up in the dark corner of the room behind me. Just standing there, staring at me. I didn't see or hear him for the whole half hour I was there. He was obviously clearly a patient of our service too and didn't look too well at that moment. Noped out of there. I used to do in-home therapy. Worst was this home with a mom with MR and 3 young kids. The house was destroyed inside. Chairs had been busted apart, the couch shredded with a knife. The beds were filthy, had no sheets and had also been knifed. The kitchen cabinets had been completely busted apart, and there were jars of pee everywhere. I asked if the plumbing worked. They showed me it did. I asked if one of the kids had a problem. Nope. Asked about the pee jars and mom just smiled and ignored me. I did call CPS. Construction inspector here. I was looking at a house about to be renovated by new buyers. The basement was all wood paneled walls, Spanish tile floors, and tons of animal heads mounted on the walls. Very old school hunting lodge style. Except there was also a room off the basement, behind a bookcase, hidden door that I only noticed because I was trying to understand the relationship between the foundation and the main floor. Small room, maybe 80 square feet. The ceiling had a single fluorescent fixture, recessed, with a heavy steel grating over it. The floor and walls were covered in sheet vinyl, and there was a single metal chair in the room. It was sitting over a floor drain. I noped out of there. The renovation never happened. The owners tore the house down and built a new one. I still can't drive by that site without feeling a chill. I used to install residential replacement windows. My boss and I have to walk in and out of almost every room that has a window. We go into this ranch-style home. I noticed a small bed and pillow on the floor in a closet. Kind of looked like a dog's bed. Then, throughout the day, I noticed they don't have a dog. They don't have a TV. They don't have any electronics, no kids' toys. But what they do have is an adopted Middle Eastern girl. That was where she slept. Mind you, they have a little girl, 5 years old maybe, with her own room, and a little boy, 7 years old maybe, with his own room, both with gate latches on the outside of the door. She slept in a closet. I mentioned it to my boss, said he's run into this kind of thing before, called them Bible beaters. He brushed it off. I didn't. I called the police, anonymously. I don't know what happened. I didn't work for that guy much longer. I work in restoration construction. There was an old lady who still had the plate that she had fixed for her husband on the counter for him when he got home. She told us it had been there for like 7 years. It was really gross looking. Also, the whole rest of the house she kept exactly like it was on the day he died. Same towel hanging in the bathroom door. His work shirt laying in the hallway floor. As we worked, she kept a close eye on us to make sure that we moved nothing. She was adamant about the whole situation. It was really creepy. The lady was nice though. She just had a screw loose upstairs. I used to pick up people who had passed away and drive them to the medical examiner's office. I've seen a lot of crazy stuff. I once picked up a woman who had been deceased and undiscovered for over 6 months. She mummified and dried to her carpet. You see, she'd been kind of a hermit up to that point. No socializing, no family, no friends. So when nobody had heard from her in 6 months, it didn't trip any alarms. I believe the mail carrier had tipped off the police to perform a welfare check. The whole house was covered in a half-inch thick layer of dust. It looked like a set from a horror film. The power had been cut for some time, though the water was still running, oddly enough. When it came time to pry her from the carpet, I started by lifting her shoulders. I should mention that people who mummify don't really do so in a consistent manner. Environmental conditions are everything. Some people freeze or dry rapidly, preserving everything quite well. This lady did not. She bloated, started to decompose, then dried out slowly. In the process, her face sort of melted and collapsed into itself, so she was covered in leathery skin, but had hollowed eye sockets and no nose. This is going to be relevant very soon. Anyway, I started to lift her shoulders very carefully, peeling her up from the carpet. As I did, dozens of spiders started out of her empty eye sockets, nose slits, and mouth. I always try to be professional. I swear, I respect the dead as much as the living. More so, really. They aren't malicious. But I have to admit that I dropped this woman immediately and sprinted out of the room. The first time I thought of was that scary stories to tell in the dark picture of the girl with the spiders hatching out of her face. It was pretty much the worst. I've kicked around the idea of doing an AMA about my experiences picking up the deceased, but for the privacy of the deceased, I won't. I chose this story among hundreds because the deceased in question had no family, but it's far from the strangest thing I've ever seen. People are weird. My SO is a repairman. He went on a call where the customer was about 45 to 50 years old and huge. I guess the customer kept talking about his wife this, his wife that, while my SO was working. The guy walks away and comes back and starts talking in a high-pitched voice about his husband. Apparently, he had suffered from a TBI and now sometimes thought he was a man with a wife and a woman with a husband. My SO said he felt so creeped out, like the guy was going to lock him in a basement or something. I work as a security guard in a condo. One week, I received a call from a lady saying her husband needed help up from his chair. I contacted one of the superintendents and went to the unit to wait. When I got inside, a gentleman in his 80s was laying on the floor with blood pooling around his head. He had a motorized chair that would take him upstairs to his bedroom and had fallen from the top of the stairs. Immediately, I told the woman to call 911, but she just wanted me to help him to his bed. I had to block her from pulling him up while calling for an ambulance. Police and ambulance arrived a few minutes later. The man ended up dying a few days later. The lady was gone for a week, but returned and came to my office to thank me for coming to her unit to assist her husband. I expressed my condolences and she said, "I accept that you're not to blame, but it's okay now." It turned my stomach. I felt so awful over it. I know there is no way I can be to blame, but hearing it was kind of sad. The next week, I get a call from her kids saying they haven't been able to get a hold of her for a few days. I contacted the super and went to the unit. The entire unit was dark except for her bedroom, which was illuminated by her bedside lamp. We go in and she's laying on the bed, with a pair of knives beside her, assorted prescription drugs, and a bottle of wine. The prescription drugs did the job as she appeared to have been dead a few days. Under the lamp was a suicide note and a portion read, "Gallian did his best to save Papa, and I'll never forget it. I've seen a lot of dead people, natural and unnatural, but this one sticks with me." I'm a firefighter in one of the most dangerous cities in America. Went to a call that was dispatched as non-breathing. Ended up finding a guy tied to a chair in the basement of a rundown vacant row home. He was given a necktie by a rival gang. They cut a slit under his chin and then pulled his tongue through the slit. The human tongue is longer than you'd think. He also showed signs of being tortured by other means, such as having every toenail and fingernail ripped out and a hypodermic needle shoved into his urethra. It was a very scary scene I'll never forget.